So Psalms chapter 33 today. This is a more of a celebratory psalm from David. We're going to learn some great things. In fact, Joseph Smith had some insight into this one as well that we'll get into. So verse 1, Rejoice in the Lord, O ye righteous, for praise is comely for the upright. Praise the Lord with harp, sing unto him with the psaltery and an instrument of 10 strings. Sing unto him a new song, play skillfully with a loud noise. So I'm going to pause there for just a second. So this is a rejoicing. This is David rejoicing, being happy, and encouraging people. Sing, share your joy of God with others. Do singing, do these things. David was a very creative person. In verse 3, he talks about singing a new song. This also can mean raise also fresh new praises and thanks to God for his ever new blessings. So not necessarily come up with a new song to sing, but sing about other things as well, basically. Don't sing about the same thing all the time. Spread it out and sing about lots of other things as well in your praise of God. We should be encouraging praise of God. Verse 4, and this is why, for the word of the Lord is right, and all his works are done in truth. He loveth righteousness and judgment. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. So this is talking about how the word is true. What God teaches you is true. God doesn't necessarily lie. Basically, he's telling you the truth. So very important point for us to understand, and that the world is full of witnessing of him. It's full of his happiness. It's full of his goodness and those opportunities. In fact, verse 6, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. He gathereth the waters of the sea together as an heap. He layeth up the depth in storehouses. Now I love verse 7. We're getting to this concept of how the creation happened by him through the word of the Lord. It wasn't so much God spoke it, but it was that God's priesthood authority allowed the commandment to come out, and the elements obeyed him because of that. Verse 7 is really fun because it talks about layeth up in depth in storehouses. In the apocryphal writings, there is this concept when it gets to we talk about creation in the Genesis period. Some of the writings in the apocryphal teachings talk about how all the elements came from a storehouse in heaven. So it's as if there's this giant warehouse in heaven, and animals are in one, maybe fish in one, bugs in another storehouse. Like these are like stables or small rooms that are a part of this larger house. And each one of these is where every element, so fire is one, wind is one, water is one, these things like that. So, and that when God created everything, he took elements out of his storehouse and used it to create this world and to populate it and those things. So it's interesting they use that same idea in here of this concept of storehouse. That was a pretty ancient philosophy and idea, a concept, a way of thinking about how creation works and did things. One thing that's really fascinating about it too is if you think about it, there's an implication in this concept of the laws of physics in a way come from these storehouses. So it's as if our world is being controlled from another dimension. Now, if you might think that sounds really weird, in quantum mechanics, in string theory, which is understanding the world of the super, super, super duper small, there is an idea that actually, like gravity, the graviton, the force-carrying particle of gravity, actually could come from possibly another dimension of space and time. And it travels into our world and affects our world. So there could be a way that our world's physics is actually controlled and governed by the physics of a different dimension of space and time. It's just a theory, but it's cool that how some of these ancient writings almost come up with some ideas. You can at least see some similarities. Whether they understood it that way, I doubt they understood it that way. But there are some similarities in here that could lead us to some possible understandings of them. All right, so let's move on here. Verse 8, let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. Now, this isn't fear as if I'm afraid that God's going to punish me. This is respect of God, basically. That's what a lot of times when they say fear the Lord, that's what they mean. Verse 9, for he spake and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. This is that kind of idea. A lot of people talk about this with creationism. You know, God said it and bam, it happened. The Big Bang Theory. It's a bumper sticker for creationism. It kind of goes along with verse 9 in a way. And we know there's priesthood and there's more involved in there and things, but what David is getting at is how God is mighty and he has provided everything for us to help us. Verse 10, the Lord bringeth the counsel of the heathen to naught. He maketh the devices of the people of none effect. So verse 10 is a fun one in talking about how the wisdom of man is worse than the folly of God. That it doesn't matter how amazing we think we are, God is so infinitely better than us that there's nothing we can do about it. And even the devices, when we set traps or we do things, it's going to not work out for us. And then verse 11, the counsel of the Lord standeth forever, the thoughts of his heart to all generations. So it doesn't matter which time frame we live in, we can have those principles of God with us. This is where scriptures and prophets and things come in. Verse 12, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. So this is David saying praise to the family of Abraham, those who God has chosen. Now we know when we get into Isaiah that while God has chosen somewhat the literal descendants of Abraham for the Abrahamic covenant and things, the people that are truly chosen of God are the ones who are keeping his commandments. And so we learn, I think it's Isaiah 56, we'll get into that more, of understanding that if you keep the commandments, it doesn't matter what your family heritage was or who you were in this mortal life. If you keep the commandments of God, he will accept you. Verse 13, the Lord looketh from heaven and beholdeth all the sons of men. From the place of his habitation he looketh upon all the inhabitants of the earth. So let me talk about this for just a second. There's in ancient Jewish philosophy, there was this idea. Sometimes when they hear the word heavens or firmament or things like that, back then they used to believe there's basically like a giant dome. Like here's the earth, and then there's this kind of dome around us, and above that dome is the heavens where God lives, and inside that dome is our earth and what we see and things like that, the known world or universe at the time. So that's kind of what they're talking about, is he's up above the earth, seeing the earth, basically. So verse 14, from the place, I read that one. Verse 15, he fashioneth their hearts alike. He considereth all their works. There is no king saved by the multitude of an host. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength. An horse is a vain thing for safety, neither shall he deliver any by his great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive in famine. So he's talking in here, David's talking about how, people can rely on themselves, the arm of flesh, if you will, for their safety, for their comfort, for their strength. And he's saying that those who rely on God will be better taken care of and be more prospered. He prospers those who wait on him. Verse 20, this is what he gets into. Our soul waiteth for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. For our heart shall rejoice in him, because we have trusted in his holy name. Let thy mercy, O Lord, be upon us, according as we hope in thee. So help us, let us receive blessings from you in conjunction with how well we follow your commandments, basically. The more faith we put in you, the more blessings we'd like for ourselves, basically. Now that's the whole verse. I told you Joseph Smith had some translation here, so we're going to go back and read his in now that we've gone through the whole verse. So this is actually connected more so to John chapter 1, verses 1 through 16. So it correlates with what we've just read here in Psalms 33. So it says in here, this one's about, in the beginning was the gospel preached through the Son, the gospel was the Word was the Son was with God, the Son was of God, the same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made which was made. In him was the gospel, and the gospel was the life, and the life was the light of men. The light shineth in the world, and the world perceiveth it not. So that's tying in well with what King David is telling us in the book of Psalms, chapter 33. So praising God, realizing that he owns everything, he controls all of it. And we are just renters. We are just here on this earth, borrowing everything he has created to help us out so that we can learn how to be like Christ. So let's jump over to the next psalm to learn more.